Exorcism is not just...
So I watched The Conjuring 3, or The Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It, I guess is the subtitle of this movie, and yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and give my quick thoughts on that. But before I do, I would like to actually talk a little bit about The Conjuring 1 and 2, just a little bit, just to kind of give you guys my quick thoughts on those. And the reason why I want to talk about The Conjuring 1 and 2 is because it's kind of been a while since I've talked about those movies on this channel. My opinions on those movies have definitely changed since I last saw them, so I actually revisited both The Conjuring and The Conjuring 2 in theaters before I saw The Conjuring 3. The movies are still fresh in my head because I just watched them, so I just kind of want to give my quick brief thoughts on those really quick. So the first two Conjuring films are both directed by James Wan, who is a pretty prolific director. He's probably one of the biggest directors working today. He directed... fucking airplane. He directed the first Saw movie. He also did Dead Silence, Death Sentence, Insidious. He did The Furious 7, Aquaman. So he's done a bunch of shit. If there's one thing he's most known for, it is for the Conjuring films. And so, what the fuck is that noise? So I did revisit The Conjuring 1 in theaters, and my thoughts on this movie are kind of the same. If not, I even maybe like The Conjuring 1 a little bit less than I initially did, and even before then, I kind of didn't even really care for the movie in the first place. I know, I'm sorry. I know The Conjuring is like one of the most beloved, you know, mainstream horror films to come out in the recent years, and I can definitely see how it earns its reputation. I mean, people love this movie, and I can totally understand why. The first Conjuring is a very straightforward haunted house possession movie, and it has some really decent moments in it. I particularly love the third act of the film. I think the third act is... As far as the rest of the movie goes, it's very simple, it's very minimalistic. I mean, it's just following this family who move into a house, and you know, strange occurrences happen in this house, and you know, the family's in danger, so they call Ed and Lorraine Warren. Yeah, it's very simple, and I know that's why people like it too. They like it because it's a simple, you know, movie. But for me personally, you know, especially compared to the second one, and we'll get to that in a bit, but the movie's fine. It doesn't really do anything bad, you know, it's not a horrible movie. It's perfectly fine, but that's kind of also where it falls flat for me personally. It's not a movie that, you know, especially after watching it recently in theaters, it's not a movie that I can see myself coming back to a whole lot, unfortunately. But it does have some decent moments in it. It has some really good scares, but it's just really hard for me to not only empathize with the family in this movie, but also kind of really care about what's going on throughout most of the runtime, you know, aside from the third act, which again is pretty cool. If I had to rate the film, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10. I know, I'm sorry. I know I'm in the minority when I think this, because, you know, I know a lot of people love this movie. Actually, you know what? I think I'll give it a 7. No, I'm gonna stick with the 6, and I'll tell you why. After watching the first Conjuring movie in theaters, it was kind of clear to me that this is not a movie that I will particularly be revisiting anytime soon in the near future. Like, it's a totally fine movie. If you like it, great, but it's not really for me personally, and that's why it's getting a 6 instead of a 7. Sorry guys. The Conjuring 2, on the other hand, holy moly, goddamn, that is one spicy meatball. This movie's fucking cool. I like The Conjuring 2 more than the first Conjuring movie, actually. I think The Conjuring 2 is a great movie, a great horror movie especially. It just does so much more interesting things, not just in terms of the story and like thematically, but it's like the filmmaking too. The filmmaking is particularly very interesting. James Wan really went all out with like the long shots and the tracking shots and like the really clever cinematography of just like following this family throughout the house. He does a really great job at making the scenes breathe, and the horror sequences especially are very, very effective. And again, it's because he lets the scenes breathe, and it just creates a really absorbing atmosphere. Not to mention, there's just countless memorable sequences in here. You have all the scenes with the nun, which are pretty damn good because she's a creepy motherfucker, and then you have the scenes with the Crooked Man. The Crooked Man is my personal favorite. He's also played by, what's his name? Javier Botet? Javier something? He's in a bunch of horror movies due to like his really lanky stature. He plays like a lot of creatures and stuff, but he plays the Crooked Man in here. I love the Crooked Man. It also looks like they use stop motion animation for the Crooked Man sequences, which is really fucking cool, and that's why I like The Conjuring 2, is because it takes risks and it does interesting things Unlike the first Conjuring, which it's kind of just a very safe haunted house movie, to me at least. But yeah, you can definitely tell that James Wan just went all out with this. It almost feels like The Conjuring 2 is kind of what he wanted the first Conjuring movie to be, but in order to make The Conjuring 2, he needed to make the first Conjuring. I mean, that's just my personal take on it. I mean, I just think The Conjuring 2 is much better. And not only that, but it's a much longer movie, which, you know, can be a bad thing, but in this particular case, it's a good thing because the characters are more fleshed out, and I actually kind of care about the family in this one, you know? I care about the children and the mom and the neighbors. We spend so much more time with the characters in this one emotionally, and it's just, for that reason, I find it much more effective. But yeah, I absolutely love The Conjuring 2. I think it's honestly a pretty great movie. I don't know, like, why people don't talk about this one as much as the first Conjuring. So, I mean, it's not a perfect movie. There's still a lot of shit wrong with it. It's not a masterpiece by any means, but it's a pretty solid mainstream horror movie. It's far better than most of the shit that we get out in theaters nowadays. So, I mean, yeah, I like The Conjuring 2. I like it a lot. I give it an 8 out of 10. I actually think that this is much better than the first. But again, that's just my take. And now that I got that out of the way, sorry, I just kind of wanted to talk about those before I talked about The Conjuring 3. That way you guys now know my thoughts on the first two Conjurings before I talk about The Conjuring 3. Or as it's called, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, which... yeah. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It is actually not directed by James Wan. It is the first film in the Conjuring franchise to not be directed by him. It is instead directed by Michael Chavez. He also did The Curse of the Llorona, which is by far the worst installment in the Conjuring universe. I watched that and it was not very good. When I first heard that, I was just kind of like, well, that's not good. Because what makes the Conjuring movies so good and memorable, in my opinion, is, you know, the fact that James Wan is behind the camera and he just adds so much of a personality and a charm to his movies. You can tell that the person behind the camera actually cares what they're doing, and James Wan just, you know, adds so much to the table when he makes these, you know, horror movies. And having Michael Chavez, the director of The Curse of the Llorona, behind the third film is not the most assuring thing to hear. So I was a little skeptical going into this, not gonna lie. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It follows Ed and Lorraine Warren as they solve a new case. This time, it is centered on the infamous 1981 Arnie Johnson trial, as well as the Brookfield murder that happened back in 1981, which I think is the same thing. Honestly, I don't know. I didn't really look that much into it. I probably should have. Fuck it. And yeah, it's kind of the same old thing, just this time with a different case. Although I will say, and I'm going to start with the things that I liked first, or the things that I think the movie did right. This film really explores the relationship and dynamic between Ed and Lorraine Warren, probably more so than the first two. And I honestly kind of like how they did that. I think it is something that needed to be done, since, you know, the first two movies, we know Ed and Lorraine Warren, you know, we know who they are. But this time it felt like we got to know them a little bit more personally, which was really cool. Now, one thing that I like about the first two Conjuring films, The Conjuring 2 in particular, is the cinematography, the way the camera moves, the way that the camera shows us what's going on throughout the scene. I think it's done very well, and it is very effective, especially it being like a haunted house horror movie. And this one still kind of does that same thing. There are some very, very interesting shots and scenes in here. There's even one shot that is literally a direct reference to the original Exorcist, where we see the silhouette of a priest looking over at a house, where he's about to do a demonic exorcist. I mean, they could have just, you know, made up their own cool shot, but you know, they just reference the Exorcist, which that's cool. But you know, I actually do like some of the shots in this movie. There's one particular tracking shot towards the beginning of the movie where, you know, it's following these people around a house, and you know, there's music playing in the background through a record player, but then all of a sudden you hear the record player skipping, and then you know, we're following this one guy as he walks into the room where the record player is, and he bumps into the record player, and because he bumped into the record player, this song, you know, goes back to normal and starts playing again. But the scene doesn't really treat that as a big deal. It's just like a minor little thing, and then, you know, the scene just continues on. It's shit like that that I really appreciate, because I feel like that's the kind of stuff you need if you want to make a horror movie, but make it feel as grounded and realistic as possible. You want to feel like you're there with the characters and not like you're watching a movie. So having little relatable stuff like that happening was really refreshing to see, honestly. But there were also some pretty not so interesting shots, a lot of very simple ones, you know, just your typical shot reverse shot, you know, just yeah, it's whatever, it's standard shit. The horror moments in this movie were pretty well done for the most part. I thought the opening scene was very strong. It just starts off with a bang, and there's a scene later on in the film that takes place in a morgue, and that scene was also pretty well done, pretty effective. I enjoyed it. I was fucking with it. I've heard a lot of people complain about the lighting in this movie, and yeah, the lighting isn't all that great. There's just some moments where it's like it could be way better. And I might be in the minority when I say this. A lot of people praise Patrick Wilson's and Vera Farmiga's performances as Ed and Lorraine Warren. I personally never really cared for Patrick Wilson's performance in any of these movies. I think he's just okay. Vera Farmiga's a little bit better. I kind of like her performance, but still it's not like groundbreaking performances or anything. They do a fine job, but it's not like, you know, not the most memorable thing out there. That, again, please put your fucking pitchforks down. I'm just a fucking guy in a room. Don't, you know, fuck you. Here's what I think the first two Conjuring movies did right, and this is why I think they have such a huge reputation in the horror genre. As mentioned, those movies just feel a lot more real, a lot more grounded. James Wan does a great job at making us, you know, step into the characters' shoes and, you know, kind of feel for the characters as we're stepping into the situation that they're in. This one, on the other hand, feels like I'm watching a big budget Hollywood horror movie that doesn't have a personality, and as a result it tries to take the personality of the first two Conjuring movies directed by James Wan and sometimes does an okay job at replicating it. Like, here's the big problem that I have with this movie. If you're gonna make a horror movie and your job is to try to scare the audience and get a strong reaction out of the audience, it's important for the scenes to flow naturally and for the film to feel as realistic as possible by adding emotional depth to the characters or by creating realistic depictions of horrific situations. And the first two Conjuring movies sometimes do this by letting the scenes breathe and by creating an absorbing atmosphere within its narrative space. But the way that this is filmed with the choppy editing and like the fast-paced shots, like it kind of takes me out a little bit. It doesn't do as good of a job as letting the scenes breathe and absorbing you into the scenes as much as the first two Conjuring movies do, in my opinion. Instead, it feels like I'm watching a Hollywood attempt at creating a Conjuring movie as opposed to actually watching a Conjuring movie. It's shit like Lorraine Warren like running in the woods and then almost about to fall off a cliff, and a demonic hand comes out of nowhere and pulls her down from the cliff and she has to be saved by her husband. It's stuff like that that just really takes me out of it. Although the first two Conjuring movies are known for doing shit like that too. I mean, look at the ending of The Conjuring 2. Like, it's kind of the same thing, but here they do it a little too much. Also, the title of this movie fucking sucks, and it just fits awkwardly with the first two movies. Like, the first two movie titles were perfect. You know, first you have The Conjuring, very simply titled, you know, very appealing title, great. And then you have the very simply titled The Conjuring 2, no subtitle, no fancy numerical, just straight up fucking Conjuring number 2. Yes, perfect. That's all we need to know. No other information is necessary. And then The Conjuring 3 comes along, but it's not even called The Conjuring 3, and instead they added this stupid ass subtitle that is way too long to pronounce and it's really lame. It's like now the flow is completely fucked up, and now The Conjuring 3 sticks out more like a sore thumb and appears to be more like a black sheep, especially compared to the first two. There's a pretty awkward moment during a very tense scene where a priest is trying to make a joke, you know, for the sake of comic relief, I guess. And it just does not work at all, and again, it takes me out of a movie, you know? All that built-up tension is just all of a sudden halted by some stupid-ass joke said by a priest. Like, really? Honestly, the scariest part about any of these movies are the credits, because during the credits, they show the real footage and audio files of the cases that these movies are based off of, and that shit's pretty fucked up, you know? That shit gets under your skin for sure. Especially this new one. This new one probably has like the scariest case out of any of the Conjuring movies, and yeah, as somebody who isn't really that religious, that shit's pretty fucked up. But yeah, I mean, The Conjuring, the devil made me do it. I mean, as you can probably tell, I didn't really care for it. I mean, it does some things okay. It does some things right, you know? Like, I like some of the tracking shots. I think some of the horror sequences are pretty well done. And I like the fact that it really focuses on the dynamic between Ed and Lorraine Warren this time around. But as a whole, as a package, I'm not that satisfied personally. Like, I don't think it's a horrible movie by any means. Like, it doesn't do anything super wrong. It's just, it could have done stuff way, way better. And you might be thinking to yourself, Jacob, you're being a little too harsh on this movie. It's really not that bad. And no, I don't think it's that bad. bad. But allow me to make a comparison between this and the original Exorcist movie. It's funny because I did watch this at home on HBO Max in my living room, and immediately after the movie was done, I was kind of scrolling through the TV channel and I saw that the original Exorcist was playing. So immediately after this one ended, I put on, you know, I think it was like the last half hour of The Exorcist or something. The difference between the two movies was like night and day. Watching the original Exorcist kind of made me realize just how commercialized most horror movies are nowadays, and just how a lot of these movies don't even really have a personality to them anymore, you know? Like the first two Conjuring movies were totally fine because James Wan was behind the camera, and James Wan is somebody who cares about the craft and he cares about what he's doing, and as a result he makes pretty solid haunted house movies. But when you have somebody like Michael Chavez, director of The Curse of the Llorona, behind the third Conjuring movie, it's like, it's not going to be the same, you know? Of course you can try to replicate the Conjuring movies, you know, the personality and the charm of the Conjuring movies, but you're not going to completely be like the first two Conjuring movies. It would have worked better if it had its own spin to it, which it kind of really doesn't. It's just going based off of what the first two Conjuring movies were doing, and for that, I'm a little disappointed. And going back to the first Exorcist, like, yeah, I mean, there were some pretty creepy moments in The Conjuring 3, but Captain Howdy in the original Exorcist is the perfect depiction of what an intimidating entity should be. Like, he's literally just a fucking face. He's a face that pops up on the screen every once in a while. It's not like a jump scare or anything, he's just there. You feel his presence, and throughout the film, you're just constantly dreading seeing that face, because you know that that face is the prime reason of everything going wrong in this movie. So subtle, yes, but very effective, even more so in my opinion. Like, yes, you have all these crazy scenes going on in The Conjuring 3, but like, are they really as effective as something like The Exorcist? Not really, not in my opinion. Overall, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, horrible title, okay movie. I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10 overall. And much like the first Conjuring movie, I can't really see myself coming back to this movie anytime soon in the near future, and that's kind of a disappointment. The Conjuring 2, on the other hand, god damn, that is how you make a fucking haunted house movie right there. That movie actually does some interesting stuff. That movie actually has a shot in it that is probably one of my favorite shots in any horror movie out there. So if you know the shot I'm talking about, then you know the shot I'm talking about. But that movie does some really tasty shit. So yeah, honestly, the big takeaway from this video, just watch The Conjuring 2, and yeah, watch 1 and 3 if you're really interested, and chances are you've probably already seen all these movies anyways, so who the fuck am I to say? But yeah, anyways, that's all I have to say. Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, there you go. And yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Please expect more videos coming soon in the near future. I will try my best to get them out as soon as I can. And yeah, that's it. Hope you all have a great day. Love you. Peace.